The hum of the fluorescent lights in the municipal archive annex was less a sound and more a low-grade fever dream. For 22 years, it had been the soundtrack to my life. 22 years of cataloging, cross-referencing and preserving the paper trails of 1,000 forgotten deals. My name is Brenda, and I was, by all accounts, a ghost in the machine. Not the shiny, innovative AI-powered ghost that tech bros yammered about, but the kind that haunts the dusty corners, the kind that remembers where every single skeleton was buried. My office, if you could call it that, was a series of interconnected metal shelves groaning under the weight of history, smelling faintly of old paper and regret. The air conditioning, a relic from a more optimistic era, wheezed like a dying man, doing its valiant best to combat the relentless summer heat that seeped in through the ill-fitting windows. My job description, on paper, was archivist and records management specialist. In reality, it was more like chief guardian of corporate amnesia. I was the one who knew where the original incorporation documents were. The ones that predated the current suit and tie brigade by a good 30 years. I knew the details of every acquisition, every merger, every poorly conceived marketing campaign that had left a paper scar on this company's soul. I was the quiet engine, the unseen gears that kept the whole rickety contraption from seizing up entirely. Most of the time, my existence was so peripheral, I might as well have been a phantom limb. People only seemed to notice me when a vital piece of paper went missing, or when their own sloppy digital habits created a cascade of audit failures they couldn't explain. Then, suddenly, Brenda was indispensable. The current emperor of this paper kingdom was a man named Sterling Finch. Finch. The name itself sounded like a bird of prey, all sharp angles and predatory ambition. He'd arrived about a year ago, a whirlwind of expensive cologne and even more expensive buzzwords. He spoke in rapid-fire pronouncements, each one more jargon-laden than the last. Synergy. Disruption. Paradigm shift. Agile velocity. My personal favorite was leveraging core competencies for scalable growth, which, in Finch speak, usually meant he'd found a new way to squeeze more work out of fewer people. He dressed like he was perpetually on his way to a golf course that only existed in his imagination. All crisp polos and designer loafers, even for Tuesday morning meetings. He never came down to the archives. Why would he? The archives were for people who dealt with the tedious, the inconvenient, the inconveniently real. Finch dealt in futures, in projections, in the ethereal realm of PowerPoint presentations, where problems vanished with a click of a mouse. My world was made of acid-free folders and carbon copy paper. His was made of air and ego. This morning, however, the air in my little dusty haven felt different. It was thick with an unspoken tension, a premonition that made the ancient filing cabinets vibrate. The intercom, a device that usually only crackled to life for fire drills or the occasional misguided pizza order, buzzed urgently. Brenda, my office, now. Finch's voice, amplified and tinny, cut through the usual ambient hum. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. I tidied the stack of legal briefs I was reviewing, a contentious intellectual property dispute from '98 that had resurfaced, wiped my hands on my sensible cardigan, and started the walk. The trek from the basement archives to the executive floor was like traversing dimensions. From the musty, dimly lit bowels of forgotten history, to the gleaming, minimalist expanse of modern corporate ambition. Polished chrome, abstract art, and the hushed footsteps of people who looked perpetually important. Finch's office was less an office and more a shrine to himself. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a glittering tapestry of progress that he undoubtedly believed he was personally weaving. His desk was impossibly clean, not a stray paperclip or coffee stain in sight. A single award-winning bonsai tree sat on a pedestal, looking as stressed as I felt. Finch himself was perched on the edge of his ergonomic throne, a look of grim determination etched onto his immaculately smooth face. Brenda, he began, his voice smoother than usual, like he was trying to butter me up before delivering a blow. Take a seat. I took the offered chair, which felt suspiciously like it was designed to keep you from getting too comfortable. I've got some news, Finch said, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting a teleprompter. Strategic realignment. You know how it island. I knew all right, I'd seen it happen to others. The polite euphemisms, the sudden reassurances, the carefully crafted exit packages that were anything but generous. Effective immediately, he continued, his gaze finally settling on me, though it didn't quite meet my eyes. Your position is being made redundant. Redundant. Such a sterile word for what felt like a sudden amputation. 22 years of institutional knowledge, just redundant. I felt a strange, detached calm wash over me. It was the calm of someone who had anticipated this exact moment for years, even if they hadn't dared to vocalize it. Finch, oblivious to my internal monologue, plowed ahead. We're streamlining operations, cutting overhead. Frankly, the archives, they're a cost center. A significant one. He gestured vaguely towards the basement, as if it were a swamp he was glad to drain. We need to be leaner, meaner, more agile. You understand? I understood perfectly. He saw me as an expensive antique, a relic of a bygone era that needed to be auctioned off, or, failing that, quietly disposed of. We need to move quickly, Brenda, Finch said, his tone hardening slightly. HR will be in touch with the details of your severance package. But before you go, there's something important. He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. This was it. The real reason I was summoned. The part that made my carefully constructed calm waver just a fraction. There are certain, sensitive documents, Finch said, his eyes finally locking onto mine, and this time, there was a flicker of something raw, something desperate, behind the practiced arrogance. Documents that might have been generated during less than ideal circumstances. You know the ones I mean. My mind flashed to a particular set of files. The ones pertaining to the illegal offshore dealings of our parent company, the ones that had been meticulously documented by the previous administration and then, thankfully, deemed too risky to act upon at the time. I, of course, had dutifully filed them, cross-referenced them, and even made a backup, just in case the world decided it needed to know. The ones from the Project Nightingale era, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the sudden surge of adrenaline that coursed through my veins. Finch visibly flinched. Exactly. Nightingale. Sensitive. Highly sensitive. We need to clean house before the new audit begins. He leaned back, a faint sheen of sweat appearing on his forehead. I need you to take those files, Brenda. All of them. And shred them. Completely. No copies, no digital backups, just gone. The shredder in the main records room is still operational. He practically vibrated with urgency, his carefully cultivated image cracking like cheap veneer. He wanted me, the quiet archivist, the keeper of forgotten truths, to be his personal exterminator. He wanted me to erase the very evidence of his company's potential crimes. And he wanted it done now. I looked at him, really looked at him. The desperate glint in his eyes, the clammy handshake he'd given me 2 weeks ago when he first toured the archives, trying to appear interested. He saw me as a tool, a disposable cog. He saw the dusty shelves as a burden, a liability. He had no idea what those shelves represented, no idea what I represented. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that precedes a perfectly executed maneuver. The kind of smile you wear when you realize the universe has just handed you a winning lottery ticket, disguised as a pink slip. Shred them, Finch repeated, leaning forward again, his voice a low, insistent plea. Burn them, whatever it takes, just make them disappear. You understand the importance of this, Brenda. This is critical. Critical. Yes, it was critical. Critically important that I did exactly the opposite. I understand, Mr. Finch, I said, my voice calm and professional, a stark contrast to the tempest brewing within me. I will handle it. He visibly relaxed, the tension draining from his shoulders like water from a sieve. Good. Good. That's very responsible of you, Brenda. We appreciate your discretion. HR will be sending you the details shortly. You can clear out your personal belongings this afternoon. He gave me a curt nod, already turning back to his impeccably clean desk, his mind clearly miles away, probably strategizing his next power lunch. The meeting was over. I had been fired. And I had just been handed the keys to the kingdom. Or at least, the keys to its undoing. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. The walk back to the archives felt different this time. It wasn't a descent into obscurity, it was a strategic retreat. The wheezing air conditioning seemed to whisper secrets of the past. The groaning shelves seemed to lean in, offering their silent support. As I pushed open the heavy metal door, the familiar scent of old paper enveloped me like a comforting embrace. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. The walk back to the archives felt different this time. It wasn't a descent into obscurity, it was a strategic retreat. The wheezing air conditioning seemed to whisper secrets of the past. The groaning shelves seemed to lean in, offering their silent support. As I pushed open the heavy metal door, the familiar scent of old paper enveloped me like a comforting embrace. Back at my desk, the stack of Project Nightingale files sat there, innocently awaiting their supposed destruction. Finch wanted them gone, he wanted them erased, he wanted them shredded. But Finch, bless his buzzword-filled heart, had made a fatal error. He'd underestimated the archivist. He'd mistaken my quiet competence for passive obedience. He'd forgotten that in the world of paper and records, a good archivist doesn't destroy, they preserve. And sometimes, preservation takes the form of a perfectly executed copy. I pulled out my personal, top-of-the-line, professional-grade scanner, a gift to myself after a particularly grueling quarterly report 2 years ago. A gift I'd justified by telling myself it was an investment in my personal organizational efficiency. Sterling Finch, in his infinite ignorance, had never even considered that I might have such a thing. He assumed I used the communal, clunky, perpetually jammed office scanner that was as temperamental as a diva opera singer. My scanner hummed to life, a quiet, determined sound that felt like a secret handshake. I started with the Nightingale files. Each document, each damning piece of correspondence, each illicit ledger entry, was fed through with painstaking care. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. This wasn't about anger, not yet. This was about meticulous preparation. This was about ensuring that when the time came, the truth would be undeniable, irrefutable, and served with a side of corporate justice. The files were thick, dense with the foul deeds of men who thought they were untouchable. There were invoices for shell corporations, offshore bank transfer confirmations, internal memos discussing creative accounting strategies that would make Enron blush. Finch wanted these gone. He wanted them incinerated, erased from history, so that his carefully crafted image of corporate rectitude could remain pristine. He wanted to bury the truth. But I've spent my entire career digging up the truth, sifting through the detritus of past decisions, and understanding the power of what's written down. You see, for Finch, these documents were a liability. For me, they were leverage. A weapon. As the scanner whirred, I mentally filed away Finch's exact words. Shred them. Completely. No copies, no digital backups. Just gone. He was so focused on the physical destruction, he'd completely overlooked the possibility of digital preservation. He assumed I was as disposable as the paper he wanted me to destroy. He assumed I was as easily erased as a temporary placeholder in a staffing spreadsheet. I continued scanning, the neat stacks of paper transforming into clean, digital files on my encrypted external hard drive. I organized them with the same precision I applied to my physical archive. Nightingale, offshore accounts. Nightingale, transaction logs. Nightingale, internal memos. Each folder a testament to Finch's desperation and his incredible lack of foresight. By the time I finished, the late afternoon sun was slanting through the dusty archive windows, painting long shadows across the metal shelves. My back ached, my eyes were tired, but a strange sense of exhilaration pulsed through me. I had just completed my final act of service for this company, and it wasn't one of preservation, but of preparation. I carefully placed the original Nightingale files into a designated destruction bin, a bin I'd strategically placed in my office years ago, solely for this purpose. I even made a show of looking through it, picking out a few miscellaneous, non-incriminating documents, and tossing them into the office shredder near the break room. A small, theatrical flourish for any potential observers. Finch wanted them shredded. He'd get his wish, eventually. But not before I'd made my own copy for the archives. My personal indestructible archive, that island. As I packed my small personal belongings into a nondescript canvas bag, a well-worn tote that had seen more important documents than Finch had ever signed, I felt no sadness. Only a quiet, resolute determination. He thought he was firing a ghost. He had no idea he was unleashing an archivist, armed with the unvarnished truth. The hum of the archives seemed to pulse with a new energy. No longer a soundtrack of resignation, but a prelude to a symphony of reckoning. I walked out of the building not defeated, but armed. And Sterling Finch, perched in his glass tower, blissfully unaware, had just signed his own eviction notice, written in the very paper he'd ordered me to destroy. The digital whispers began almost immediately. At first, they were faint, like static on a forgotten radio frequency. A confused email from facilities. System alert. Access to the Sterling Finch folder denied. Brenda, can you override? Then a frantic text from Sarah in marketing. A woman whose job was to spin Finch's every pronouncement into gold. Brenda, are you kidding me? The Q the 3rd of March Keating projections just disappeared. My entire presentation is gone. I forwarded Sarah's text to my personal encrypted email, alongside a screenshot of Finch's original directive. Shred them, completely. No copies, no digital backups. Just gone. The irony was starting to simmer, a pleasant warmth spreading through me. Finch thought he was cutting costs by eliminating me, the redundant archivist. He didn't realize he was disconnecting the very servers that housed his carefully constructed illusion. The Nightingale files, as he so delicately put it, were not just financial records. They were a comprehensive exposé of the company's ethically questionable and likely illegal offshore dealings, the kind of dealings that could land executives in jail and shareholders in a financial black hole. I hadn't just scanned them, I'd meticulously cross-referenced them with internal memos, board minutes, and even personal calendars I'd quietly preserved. My personal archive wasn't just a collection of files. It was a roadmap to Sterling Finch's impending implosion. The first real tremor hit the next morning. I received a curt email from HR, not the promised severance package, but a generic departmental notice. Due to unforeseen system maintenance, access to all shared drives and internal databases will be temporarily suspended until further notice. Temporarily suspended, I knew better. Finch, likely in a blind panic, would have ordered IT to purge anything related to Nightingale and probably anything else that smelled remotely of historical data. He was trying to erase the evidence, and in doing so, was systematically dismantling the company's operational infrastructure. My phone buzzed incessantly. Old colleagues, people I'd barely spoken to beyond a polite nod in the hallway, were suddenly reaching out. Brenda, my emails aren't sending. Is there a network issue? Brenda, the client portal is down. They're threatening to pull their account. Brenda, Finch is losing his mind. He's yelling at IT about data integrity. What did you do? What did I do? I simply followed his orders. Or rather, I followed the spirit of his orders, in the way that only a seasoned archivist could. He wanted the incriminating documents gone. So, I made sure they were gone from his system. Their absence, however, was creating a void. The panic escalated with the speed of a wildfire. I saw mass emails flying back and forth between departments, frantic requests for data that no longer existed, desperate attempts to recall information that had been deliberately scrubbed. Sarah from marketing, bless her heart, even tried to ping me on the company intranet. Brenda, seriously, where are the Q3 numbers? They were right there yesterday. I let her message sit unanswered. I was too busy. I was meticulously organizing my Nightingale files, creating subfolders for specific departments, cross-referencing them with employee roles. Finch had claimed I was redundant, but it seemed my redundancy was now the very linchpin holding his company together. Then came the call from David, the head of IT. David was a decent sort, perpetually overworked and underappreciated, much like myself. His voice on the phone was strained, laced with a weariness that went beyond a long day. Brenda, he started, his voice a hushed whisper, as if afraid someone might overhear. Are you still in possession of the Nightingale files? I took a slow sip of my herbal tea, the calming aroma, a stark contrast to the frantic energy radiating from David's end of the line. Mr. Chen. I replied, my voice as placid as a still lake. I understand you're experiencing some data retrieval challenges. Challenges? David practically choked. Brenda, it's a catastrophe. Finch ordered a full system purge of all historical data related to Project Nightingale this morning. He said it was a cleansing initiative. But it's taken down half the network. Sales can't access client histories, finance can't reconcile accounts, and legal is having a complete meltdown. They need those files for the Oakhaven case. It's due tomorrow. Oakhaven. Of course. The Oakhaven dispute was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that hinged entirely on the financial improprieties documented within the Nightingale files. Finch had been so eager to bury his past, he'd accidentally buried his company's present. I see, I said, my voice dropping to a thoughtful cadence. A cleansing initiative. That sounds thorough. Brenda, please. David pleaded, the desperation palpable. Finch is threatening to fire half the IT department if they can't recover this data. He's convinced someone inside IT, mishandled the purge. He's demanding to know who had access to those files. The original archival copies. He was fishing for a scapegoat, and he'd zeroed in on the most obvious target. But Finch, in his haste, had overlooked a crucial detail. I hadn't just scanned the Nightingale files. I had also discreetly sent a highly encrypted copy of the entire archive, Nightingale files included, to a secure, off-site cloud server registered under a pseudonym I'd set up years ago. A just-in-case measure. Every document, every memo, every illicit transaction. My digital insurance policy. Mr. Chen, I began, my voice shifting from calm to something with a bit more gravitas. Regarding the Nightingale files, as per Milester Finch's directive, I ensured their complete removal from the company network. David's breath hitched. So they're gone? In a manner of speaking, I replied, a subtle smile playing on my lips. Mr. Finch was very clear about shredding. And I am, after all, a diligent employee. Or, I was a diligent employee. I heard him swallow. Brenda, what does that mean? It means, I said, picking up my phone and composing a brief, carefully worded email, that Mr. Finch's directive was extremely specific about the method of destruction. He emphasized physical shredding, but he also mentioned no digital backups, which, of course, is a rather limiting instruction when dealing with historical data. I typed furiously, addressing the email to Sterling Finch, the entire executive board, the head of legal, and, for good measure, the general counsel of the Oakhaven litigation. The subject line was simple, regarding Project Nightingale documentation, fulfillment of directive. The body of the email was even simpler. Dear Mr. Finch and esteemed colleagues, following my dismissal and your subsequent directive to shred completely, no copies, no digital backups, I have ensured the complete removal of all Project Nightingale-related documents from the company's accessible systems. This was achieved by systematically isolating and purging all related data from servers, shared drives, and individual workstations. However, in my capacity as archivist, my duty to preserve critical historical records, especially those pertaining to legal and regulatory compliance, remains paramount. Therefore, in accordance with my professional obligations, and to ensure the integrity of pending legal matters such as the Oakhaven case, I have, prior to the purging of all other accessible data, created a secure, independently managed digital archive of all Project Nightingale documentation. This archive, stored off-site, contains all original files, including financial ledgers, internal memos, and correspondence related to the project. This archive will be made available to relevant parties, including the Oakhaven legal team and the regulatory bodies overseeing Project Nightingale, within 24 hours, unless otherwise instructed by a formal, mutually agreed-upon resolution between myself and the company. Sincerely, Brenda, former archivist and records management specialist. I hit send. A small, almost imperceptible click that sounded like a seismic shift in the corporate universe. David, on the other end of the line, was silent for a long moment. Then, a choked, disbelieving sound escaped him. Brenda, you didn't. Oh, I did, David, I said, my voice now carrying the quiet satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. Mr. Finch wanted the evidence gone. I've simply curated its disappearance and ensured its inevitable reappearance. The panic in David's voice was now a tangible thing. He's going to have a heart attack. He just fired the one person who could actually control this. Precisely, I said, leaning back in my chair. He asked me to shred the documents. I made a copy for the archives, his archives, and mine. The faint hum of the archive annex, once a symbol of my obsolescence, now sounded like the quiet hum of a ticking time bomb. Finch thought he had silenced me. He had no idea I was about to make the truth roar. The first official communication from Sterling Finch arrived not as a panicked phone call, but as a sterile, legalistic email from the company's general counsel, a Mr. Reginald Thorne. Thorne was known for his glacial demeanor and his uncanny ability to draft clauses that could tie a man in legal knots for a decade. The subject line read, "Urgent, Project Nightingale documentation." The email itself was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, hinting at unforeseen complications and misunderstandings regarding data management protocols. It politely, but firmly, requested the immediate and unconditional return of all archived Nightingale data. It also subtly suggested that Brenda's continued possession of such data might be considered a breach of her NDA. A veiled threat, couched in legalese. I didn't respond to Thorne directly. Instead, I forwarded his email, along with my own, to a carefully selected list of recipients. This included the lead counsel for the Oakhaven lawsuit, the Securities and Exchange Commission's Corporate Fraud Division, and, for good measure, a prominent investigative journalist I'd been following for years, known for his tenacity in uncovering corporate malfeasance. I added a simple, unambiguous note, "For your immediate attention, fulfillment of directive complete." The response was almost instantaneous. Thorne's phone call, when it finally came, was a stark contrast to his initial email. The glacial demeanor had melted, replaced by a frantic, almost desperate tone. "Miss Albright," he began, his voice strained. "Mr. Finch wishes to discuss the Nightingale files. He understands you have them. And he wants to explore a resolution." Explore a resolution. Corporate speak for "please don't ruin us." A resolution, I echoed, my voice calm and even. And what kind of resolution did Mr. Finch have in mind when he ordered the destruction of critical evidence? Thorne paused, likely consulting with Finch, who I imagined was pacing frantically in his opulent office, his silk tie askew. "Mr. Finch acknowledges that there may have been a misunderstanding. He wishes to rectify the situation. He's prepared to offer significant compensation for the return of the files." Significant compensation, I repeated, a slow, knowing smile spreading across my face. Mr. Finch wants to pay to bury his own crimes. How innovative. "Miss Albright," Thorne pressed, his voice tightening, "we are talking about a substantial severance package, more than generous. And your position, Mr. Finch is willing to discuss reinstatement with a significant advancement in title and salary. He values your discretion. Discretion. He wanted to buy my silence. But Finch had already made his choice when he'd ordered me to shred the truth. He had chosen convenience over consequence, ego over ethics. "Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice taking on a firmer, more decisive tone. "The Nightingale files are not for sale. They are not a bargaining chip. They are the factual record of a company's malfeasance, and they have already been submitted to the appropriate authorities. The Oakhaven lawsuit will proceed. The SEC will investigate. Your significant compensation is irrelevant." A choked sound came from Thorne's end. You've already sent them? To the SEC? To Oakhaven's counsel?" "Indeed," I confirmed. "And to a few other interested parties who appreciate transparency. It appears Mr. Finch's directive to shred completely had some unintended consequences." The silence on the line was deafening. I could practically feel Thorne's carefully constructed world crumbling. "So," I continued, my voice unwavering, "there are nowhere solutions to be explored, only consequences." However, I paused, allowing the weight of my words to settle. Mr. Finch did ask me to handle things, and I believe in thoroughness. So, I'm willing to present him with two options, as per my copy for the Archives initiative. I let that sink in for a moment. Finch had tried to erase me. Now, I was offering him a chance to control the narrative, albeit a very grim narrative. Option A, I began, is the narrow escape hatch. Mr. Finch immediately resigns from his position. He cooperates fully and truthfully with all ongoing investigations. The company initiates a swift and transparent settlement with Oakhaven, facilitated by the information I provided, with a substantial financial penalty, of course, but one that avoids a complete company collapse. He also issues a formal, public apology, acknowledging his role in the cover-up and his dismissal of me. The company agrees to a complete board overhaul, and I receive a generous settlement for my years of service, along with a non-disparagement agreement, of course. Thorne was practically hyperventilating. And option B? He whispered. I took a deep breath, the scent of my now cooling tea filling my senses. This was the nuclear option. Option B. I stated, my voice as cold and precise as a scalpel, is the complete meltdown. Mr. Finch refuses to resign. The company fights the Oakhaven lawsuit, loses spectacularly, and faces massive regulatory fines and potential criminal charges for obstruction of justice and financial fraud. The public scandal implodes the company's stock price. Their investors pull out, and Mr. Finch becomes a pariah, likely facing personal legal repercussions. In this scenario, my copy for the archives becomes the blueprint for their public humiliation. I would not seek a settlement. I would simply allow the truth to unfold, unhindered and unedited. And I would personally ensure the investigative journalist receives all the supplementary material I have on Finch's unique management style. The ensuing silence was heavy with the unspoken dread of what option B would entail. Thorne finally stammered, We need to consult with Mr. Finch. Immediately. I understand, I replied. I will await your decision. 24 hours. I then ended the call, feeling a profound sense of calm. The meticulous preparation, the quiet scanning, the strategic archiving, it had all led to this moment. The dust of the archives had been the fertile ground for a harvest of reckoning. The next morning, Thorne called back. His voice, though weary, held a new, albeit reluctant, tone of finality. Miss Albright, he said, Mr. Finch has decided to accept option A. A small victory, but a significant one. Finch would fall, but perhaps not into utter ruin. He would be disgraced, his empire dismantled, his reputation in tatters, but he would avoid the full force of a criminal trial, for now. The news spread like wildfire through the corporate grapevine. Finch's resignation was announced internally with a brief, carefully worded statement about pursuing new opportunities. The Oakhaven settlement was quietly finalized, the company agreeing to a substantial financial payout. The journalist I'd contacted published a front-page exposé, painting Finch as a cunning executive who nearly destroyed his company through sheer arrogance and deceit, but who, thanks to a swift decision to cooperate, narrowly avoided prison. It was a narrative that painted him as a flawed character, who ultimately made the right choice. A narrative I had carefully curated. As for me, the generous settlement was more than enough to ensure my comfort for years to come. It wasn't just financial compensation, it was a quiet acknowledgement of the value I'd always possessed, value Finch had been too blind, too arrogant, to see. I also received a discreet, handwritten note from the Oakhaven legal team, simply stating, Your diligence saved us years of painstaking work, thank you. I never set foot back in the archives. My copy for the archives was securely stored, a testament to the power of meticulous record-keeping. Sterling Finch, I heard, was last seen giving motivational talks at community colleges, his expensive loafers replaced by sensible, worn-out loafers. His tales of synergy and disruption now carried the hollow ring of a charlatan caught in his own web of deceit. The hum of the fluorescent lights of the Municipal Archive Annex was no longer a low-grade fever dream, it was a memory. A quiet hum that now represented not obsolescence, but the silent, unyielding power of truth. I had been asked to shred the evidence. Instead, I had archived it. I had preserved the truth, and in doing so, I had brought down an empire built on lies. And if watching Sterling Finch's meticulously crafted world crumble around him, all thanks to a forgotten directive and a meticulous archivist, made you feel a little spark of satisfaction, then consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more tales of quiet competence triumphing over arrogant incompetence. Because sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't the loudest voice, but the one that knows exactly where all the skeletons are buried, and has the receipts to prove it. Because in the end, it's not about revenge, it's about restoring the record.